RWBY, Volume 5, Episode 1. Welcome to Haven. What happens? The episode begins with Ranger and Crow entering Mistral. The kids take a moment to gawk at the painted scenery and 2D people before heading off to the school. We then transition to Weiss, who is still in transit to Haven. The radio picks up an SOS signal, and while Weiss wants to help, the pilot steers the ship away. Back with Ranger, the kids find the school empty, except for the headmaster, Lionheart. Off in Menagerie, the Belladonnas and Sun return from talking with the Albane brothers, apparently? Ilya shows up, and after she and Blake chit-chat about the White Fang, we jump back to Ranger. The gang and Leo talk about politics until Lionheart and Crow explains that the maidens are the only ones able to access the relics. Winter gets creation, summer gets destruction, fall gets choice, and spring gets knowledge. The conversation continues to explain that the Spring Maiden is missing, but Crow knows she's with his sister Raven. It's established that Ranger need to wait around for Lionheart to get some huntsmen to help go after the tribe. As the gang leave, we get let in on the fact that Lionheart's actually working with Salem, and we jump to the same scene we got after the credits for Volume 4. After that, we cut to Yang at a bar and gas station. She gets hit on, punches the guy, and gets ready to head off with his direction. Back with Ranger, the kids meet Oscar as Crow drunkenly celebrates. Okay. While this background is pretty, these drawings of people are only distracting. The art's really nice and I like a lot of the character designs, but it looks so blatantly different from the 3D models the rest of the world exists in that it immediately pulls the viewer out of their immersion. Which isn't a good thing to do 1 minute into your first episode. Moreover, it gives us a message loud and clear. We're never going to see Mistral throughout the volume. They couldn't have been bothered to render up some simple scenery and characters, so of course Team Ranger aren't going to be coming back to the town proper. Electing instead to keep themselves holed up in their apartment for the entire volume. Choosing to introduce the audience to such an important city this way feels lazy, and ultimately is a disappointment. If they had done this without destroying the viewer's immersion, then this scene would have been way more fun.
Oh my gosh, look at all the weapons!
Oh, that's nice that RWBY mentions the weapons. Too bad we don't see that again for 14 more episodes. Weiss's scene is nice. The transition to it is really cool, and the dialogue feels natural. The idea that Weiss has to deal with not always being able to help is an interesting one, and acts as a cool reflection to her life in Atlas. She wants to help, but getting the chance to do so is out of her hands. However, this doesn't really go anywhere, as this conflict isn't brought up again, and Weiss and the pilot end up fighting these Grimm anyway. It's a well done, if empty scene, feeling like it's only really here to make sure Weiss gets some screen time. This whole bit with everyone yelling and fainting is actually really cute and funny. Honestly, this is probably my favorite part of the episode. Great comedic timing. Lionheart's design is disappointing. He's definitely not the hottie I was hoping for, but beyond that, it's kind of a letdown. His hair doesn't quite have the lion's mane look they were going for. His color palette is uninteresting, with nothing accenting his abundance of brown. Lionheart has a hard time standing out from the background. That being said, Damon Mills does a real nice job voicing him, so at least he's got that going for him. We're later shown that Leo's a lion faunus, but boy was that a surprise. His tail was a better surprise than Tyrion's, and I don't even think Lionheart's was deliberate. We never see his tail until episode 11. I guess RWBY and friends knew about it since they don't comment on it later. It's just so not established here. I guess one could argue, he's the cowardly lion, why wouldn't he be a lion faunus? But characters who are based on animals aren't always faunus in this show. It's completely inconsequential and doesn't change his character at all. It just kind of feels like something they'd establish when we first see him, you know? How come only the girls get to do obnoxious poses while the guys just have to stay in the background and move as little as possible? It makes RWBY and Nora come off as annoying or full of themselves, while Jean and Ren seem like nobody background characters. Guys can pose too, and girls don't always have to. This is a dumb way to introduce Blake's part in this episode. The audience is left wondering what the group has just returned from and is so upset about for way too long into the scene. Getting to actually see the Belladonnas confront the brothers could have been cool, but this isn't a necessarily bad way to do this scene. The problem is just that the audience is lost and left behind for too long needlessly. Why is everyone moving so slow? This shot of Blake is especially annoying. Fucking move! Why are we still just looking at her?
It's okay, Sosuke. I forgive you.
What is going on? Cut back to me. What the hell is with this pacing?
Once Blake gets onto the balcony, things get much better. The characters remember that they can actually move, and the conversation not only establishes Blake's plot for the volume, but also explores hers and Ilya's characters a bit. Bonus points to Shirami Lei, who not only does a good job during the scene, but consistently gives one of the best performances of the volume. This shot perfectly represents how it feels the creators think of Ren and Nora. Shoved into the background, barely visible, and only participating in the story to make a joke. Why do only Ruby and John get to react to Lionheart's retelling of the fall of Beacon? Why have these characters in the show if you clearly don't care about them? It feels like Ren and Nora weren't intended to still be in the story by now, and are only here because they failed to establish their tragic backstories yet. I get the sneaking suspicion that once we learn more about Nora's past, the two will be killed off, or left behind. And what a shame that would be. To willingly drop the two members of Ranger who don't annoy me. Why does Ruby speak up here? The line is delivered as if she's breaking up a fight, but Lionheart and Crow were speaking normally. Things were tense, but they certainly weren't yelling at each other. It kind of feels shoehorned in to let Ruby do something relatively important during the episode. It's nice to get to know how the Maidens and Relics work together. It helps let the audience try to figure out Salem's motives without simply telling us all the villain's plans. However, this conversation between Crow and Leo is mighty boring, even on a first watch. We're getting new information, but it's done so slowly that it becomes hard to pay attention. Why does Crow think Raven's got the Spring Maiden? I mean, he's ultimately not really wrong, it's just that last volume we only saw him asking if Raven knew where she was. And now he suddenly knows she's with Raven? It's a bit of a jump, and it would have been nice to see the moment where Crow figured this out. Why does everyone react to Raven's name? The way Yang spoke about it in Volume 2 implied that this wasn't something she brought up often. It was a way of opening up to Blake, by telling her about her mom. I just don't believe she'd tell Juniper about her mom, especially since I can't think of a single time she interacted with anyone from the team. And I definitely don't think Ruby would be so rude as to bring it up with the others without Yang's consent. The fact that Jean's the one to say, Yang's mom? Is the most annoying part. You're telling me that Yang not only opened up to Team Juniper about her mother, but also told them her full name? And didn't tell Weiss? Weiss doesn't know Raven's Yang's mom later, even though she's mentioned by name and looks exactly like her daughter. Simply giving the line to Ruby would have alleviated this problem, or even better, having one of the Juniper members ask who before she says it. This map is dumb. It's so damn bright and the backlighting from the windows makes it near impossible to see. It being a hologram is cool, but maybe chilling out on the bloom effect so your characters can actually see the dang thing. Crow knocking over Leo's books feels so unnecessary. We already know you're upset, you don't need to be a jerk about it. Lionheart says these kids don't have what it takes to take on an entire tribe and Maiden. But the Volume 2 finale against waves of Grimm and having Ranger handily take down a super killing machine kind of proves otherwise. Maybe don't establish your characters as masters of combat if you want to pretend they're still not ready to handle things like bandits. I hate that Jean gets a moment to be angry about Cinder. Grr, she killed Pyrrha, I'm mad. We fucking know. It's all you ever do anymore. Jean's entire character is, Pyrrha's dead and I'm pissed about it. Let another character be upset over the loss of a friend too. And let Jean do more than be an edgelord over the death of his first kiss. I'm tired of it. A part of me wants to be annoyed that Crow waggled his scroll at Leo here, but I don't know, I think it's a little cute. You know what would have been a great idea? Keeping Leo's turncoat nature a secret to the audience until the heroes learned about it. While that would mean losing a pretty nice scene later, it would have been way more fun to be hit with a surprise like the kids, rather than simply knowing more than the protagonists. Us knowing about Lionheart's betrayal does nothing, really. We're privy to some conversations that are later recapped by the villains, and lacks any kind of tension. We simply know more than our heroes, and it gets us nowhere. The scene was good. The first time I watched it. It makes sense to put it here, but it's pretty disappointing that it's effectively just a reused scene. I would have preferred it if instead of just getting this again, we got to see Oscar heading into the bar or something, implying the bit to follow without just reusing what we've already seen. What a dumb set piece. A bar and gas station together? In a world where everyone carries around firearms? Drunk plus gasoline times gunshots equals explosions. Why not just drop the gas station angle? It's not unreasonable to assume Yang dropped into a bar to get something to drink and maybe some info on Raven. Not to mention how ugly it is. It looks unfinished with its bland walls and ill-conceived layout. This probably would have been a painting too if Yang didn't have to actually walk around in it. While I love this bartender, he cracks me up. It's mighty distracting how he apparently has to lie down on the floor for almost 2 minutes just to get Yang her water. Like, why not just have him go into the back room if you don't want him participating in Yang's conversation with Shady Man? Oh yeah, it's because they pushed the set and scene out last minute because they needed Yang to be in the episode somehow. So I love the references to the original stories these characters allude to, and I wish it happened more often. But Yang's just right. Yep, line is a little too on the nose. You expect us to believe she gets referred to being just right enough for her to know that's how he's going to finish his sentence? Would have been nice to see some of that then. Ying's head looks too big? It might be because of her hair, but her head size is distracting throughout the entire volume. While I have no problem with Shady Man rubber bouncing his way out of the just right bar and gas station, I think it would have been funnier if he was jettisoned from the establishment, rocketing out of the door rather than bouncing around, but it's still pretty fun as it is. So, Ying's hand shakes sometimes throughout the volume. It's supposed to be her PTSD affecting her. This is stupid. PTSD symptoms include nightmares, unwanted memories, avoidance of situations that bring back those memories, heightened reactions, anxiety, and depression. Patients experience agitation, hostility, self-destructive behavior, or social isolation. They suffer from flashbacks, fear and mistrust, loss of interest, loneliness, insomnia, and emotional detachment. While having your hands shake is often a symptom of PTSD, this is about as far as they go with it. Clearly, they added this small shake to satiate all the viewers who insisted Ying wasn't fit to leave yet due to her PTSD. However, they obviously don't intend to explore Yang's psychosis within the show, focusing more on her friend leaving rather than the traumatic event of losing an arm. I'll talk about this more later, but this handshake annoys me, because it's an empty gesture that was added to keep the viewers from complaining without actually exploring the development of the character. I like that Ren, Nora, and Jean are on high alert when Oscar asks for RWBY, but he's not really the most threatening person, don't you think? So, Drunk Uncle Crow, lovingly referred to as Drunkle Crow within the fandom, is not that funny. Like, I wouldn't call it annoying, and I like seeing the characters having fun. It's just nothing special is all. Certainly not the laughed so hard I fell out of my chair crying for hours on end funny that most of the comments seem to think on the RT site. What is annoying is how RWBY fucking explains the joke to us.
Crow, did you get drunk again?
Fucking duh. Just let the joke happen. Don't have your characters spell it out to us. Also, I thought he was always drunk, which is why the Scarecrow's got wobbly knees. But if I brought up benign shit like that all the time, I'd never finish these scripts. Also, how come RWBY's the only one who elected to do something once they got to the house? Where are they? Jean, Nora, and Ren are just sitting around when Oscar shows up. Why is RWBY the only one who chose to do something with her time? Why would Oscar care if RWBY has silver eyes? I guess Ozpin could have told him about the special-eyed protags of the world, but Oscar is so reserved that it's kinda odd for him to comment on it here. And so, that's Welcome to Haven. A lot actually happens in this episode, which is why it's confusing that it feels like nothing gets done. This is the first time a volume opening didn't include any combat. I thought this was supposed to be an action anime. The most action we got this episode was Crow pushing around Leo's books. Not to mention how slowly everything happens. Everyone really takes their time to move or speak. While it's fine, it does tend to drag, especially on a first viewing when the audience is waiting for a fight to happen, which ultimately never comes. The timing on everything was so weird that I had felt like something was off when I first watched the episode. I had thought, they showed this at RTX, right? Then why is it so slow and feels like it was rushed out when every other first episode of a volume was great fun? Well, I did some research and I found the answer. This episode was played in select theaters, meaning people had to pay $12.50 to see what ultimately ended up being a 23-minute long trailer. Ignoring how wildly overpriced that is, even if these viewings included interviews with the creators, this explains why everyone moves so slowly. It's most egregious with Blake's introduction. She's pausing to let the audience applaud. While this may work in a theater full of excitable fans, it results in an annoyingly paced episode. Where the theatrical showing gave time for the audience to react, I'm just sitting in my apartment waiting to finally cut away from a character. While I have no problem with the theatrical release, I wish the overall speed of the episode didn't have to suffer for it. I remember that I was really disappointed with this episode when I first watched it. No action, annoyingly lingering on characters for no reason, overall slow pace. It felt like I was robbed of the usually fun first episode to instead be force-fed exposition that ultimately felt like the 5th trailer for the volume. Upon rewatching it and some reflection, I have to admit that it's really not that bad. Yes, it is slow and can get boring in the middle, but it's certainly not the worst episode of the volume. While it would be preferable to not have to watch an episode multiple times to come to terms with it, it'd be better to like it on a first viewing, I can't in good conscience say that this is a bad episode. It could have benefited from being paced and edited in a way that was fun to watch, even if you're alone in your room rather than in a full theater. And having some combat to get your blood pumping for the volume would have helped a bunch. All in all, Welcome to Haven is a fine episode. Not great, not bad. It looks nice and is acted well, the transitions aren't jarring tone shifts, and RT seems to have figured out how to do establishing shots. A, for the most part, well done, if pretty slow episode to kick off the volume.